According to the CNN Justice article, California college's student president stabbed, hate crime alleged. The student body president in 2010 was stabbed multiple times not far from the Chico State University campus for his racial background. The student body president was born in Nigeria and fortunately has recovered. How does this hate crime relate to Chico State campus? How prevalent and severe is racism among our student body? What is being done to combat this problem? This documentary will address and answer these important questions and concerns. What brought you to Chico State?
Just getting away from home. I didn't really know about this school up until like a few months before I graduated, and I found out it was kind of like a rural area. Kind of wanted to get away from the city, so.
Initially, honestly, I chose Chico State because my girlfriend that I've been with now, it's been 10 years, going on 11 years. At the time, I didn't want to be too far away from her, so I'm from Sacramento, and I think my options were Sac State. I think I got accepted to Arizona, and I got accepted to Chico State. And my parents said I couldn't go to Sac State because it was too close, so I chose Chico State. And they happen to be alumni, so I was like, I guess I'll know some people. So I did know some faculty and staff before I even got here because they went to school with some of them at this university.
I chose it because it was nice and green. There's a lot of outdoorsy things to do, and the town is nice and small, but still big feeling.
Really the atmosphere and just the nutrition program I heard was really well instructed, and also there's a lot of opportunities that open up in the North State immediately after I got my degree. And just the environment, like I said, it's beautiful up here in the winter and the summer, so I really do like it.
For one thing, I heard about the teaching program, and I kind of wanted to go to experience Northern California since I always lived in Southern California.
How do you identify yourself?
You know, I guess it's kind of I don't want to say sliding scale, but I mean, I'll refer to myself as African American or black. You know, those are the two that I usually throw around.
Racially, I guess I'm brown or something. Ethnically, I consider myself Mexican American. One, because I was raised in Mexico. Basically, I lived in Mexico for 5 years, when I was 5 to 10. I was born here. I remember a little bit from when I was younger. But yeah, I was basically raised. I was, from where I remember my childhood, most of my childhood was in Mexico, and kind of didn't really have. It kind of made me the person I am today as well. And coming to the U.S., getting an education. Learning the language has just made me even better person. So I consider myself first Mexican, then American, Mexican American.
I call myself Mexican American. American being because I was born here, but I mean down in my blood, I almost have full Mexican in me, except for pretty much my last name that comes all the way down from my dad's side. But besides that, I do identify a lot with other people who are Mexican American in the case, but it's definitely not the fact that I only identify with them or seclude myself to just that group. I definitely branch out and pretty much befriend anybody who's willing to, have that kind of friendship attitude.
According to the Chico State back page, Chico State University has an average age of 22 for the undergraduate student body. The two largest ethnic groups contained in the student body are white at 52.4% and Hispanic Latino at 22.1%. The percentages of some of the other ethnic groups include 0.6 for American Indian, 5.5 for Asian, 1.8 for African American, and 0.1% for Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian. This equates to 4.9% of the student population being from out of state or an international student. How would you define stereotyping?
The stereotype is kind of like, I think stereotype is just this idea that people have and label other groups of people. I just think, in terms of stereotyping, I can say things like, Mexican eat tacos or something, and Chinese people make Chinese food. but it's just kind of like where they're, who they are, where they were raised, and that's just how they are. Not really a stereotype. Stereotype is more like, it sounds more like a bad thing rather than explaining what they do.
I mean, I just think it's just kind of like the general thing that people associate with a group, and it could be any group. It doesn't have to just be people. There's stereotypes about college students or colleges. There are stereotypes about those who aren't college educated. So I think it's just a kind of a general pool of assumptions that you attach to something without really having gone into really get to understand or know whatever that person is or whatever.
Stereotyping, I'd say it's a pretty crude definition of, I mean, harmful stereotyping, I guess, would be...
Yeah, either or.
Yeah, harmful stereotyping, because I kind of have a few definitions, but harmful stereotyping would be assuming that, without even talking to someone, that someone has certain characteristics, they think a certain way, they're from a certain background. Whereas, not friendly, but not harmful stereotyping would be like, if you're working with someone and you get to that point where it's like, oh, he's the guy that's like, and just because he's African American, they're afraid to say, oh, he's the African American guy that works like that.
How would you define racism?
Racism is just discrimination and just ill feelings toward a certain race or ethnicity.
For me, I would consider somebody racist if they believed their race was superior and they thought other races were inferior. And because of their beliefs, they treated people of different ethnicities as if they were lower class or subordinate human beings.
I would definitely say that someone who is racist and portrays racism is just someone who really has something bothering them at the bottom of them that's making them project hate out towards another certain type of people, or someone that just really doesn't care enough to respect themselves that they don't care what they say or what anybody else thinks about them in that sense, which in some cases you do not have to care about what someone thinks about you, but not in that sense. So I would definitely say that someone who is racist is someone who just has something stemming from them and they're handling it with the wrong situation or with the wrong way to handle it.
According to No Way Racism, an anti-racism educational program, direct racial discrimination happens when someone is treated less fairly than someone else in a similar situation because of their race, color, descent, or national or ethnic origin. For example, if a school will not hire a staff member just because of his or her race or ethnicity. Indirect racial discrimination can happen when a policy or rule treats everyone in the same way, but has an unfair effect on more people of a particular race, color, descent, or national or ethnic origin than others. For example, a rule that says that students may not wear anything on their heads could result in discrimination against students whose religions require headwear. Is racism and stereotyping a problem on campus?
Personal side, as far as being African American and being a black male, I think the biggest one that I see is that walking around at nighttime and the reactions that you get from people when they see you. I actually intentionally, I try and make myself look less threatening, because I know that when I'm walking, down Warner after class and I see, a woman, just a woman in general, it doesn't even have to be a white woman or it's just a woman, that when they see me, they immediately think, okay, I gotta be alert, and they should be alert because there's a lot of crazy people out there. But the fact that I just fall in that category, I've spent a lot of my time up here, if I'll try and walk across the street and go to the other side just so they feel, more comfortable. So it's not something that's necessarily verbalized. Never stopped anybody to have that conversation with them. But you after seeing it so many times, you kind of can tell when someone, their eyes kind of see you, and then it's like, oh God, I need to, be more alert, be a little bit more safe. Or suddenly they pull out their phone and they're having a conversation. It's just so that'd be the one thing that it's been consistent since I've been here.
Yes, but and more lightheartedly, like we live in the dorms, or kind of the dorms, and I've gotten the question that if I was an international student, I think twice. Just like one girl outside, she was like, oh, how long have you been here? Your English is really good. And I was like, oh, okay. I just transferred here from like 2 hours away, but okay.
Yeah, sort of. Like, an experience I had with a particular friend could be considered racist. I just met him, and I guess he got too comfortable with me, so he would say, like, racial jokes, and at first I didn't know how to take it, because I was like, he sounds like he's joking, but at the same time, it could be taken offensively, so for the most part, I sort of just, I kind of, shrugged it off. I was just like, oh, whatever, he's just joking. Like, one thing I remember he did in particular was the...
Well, my name is Dory Shatner. I'm an adjunct faculty lecturer, so a professor, but I'm not technically full-time. This is what adjunct means, part-time. And I have been working here for the past 8 years, teaching psychology courses.
In what ways do you see racism still on campus?
Well, you don't really see a lot of very obvious forms of racism nowadays because it's frowned upon. But as far as more subtle forms of racism, you might see, for example, someone deciding not to sit next to someone in a classroom because they're a different race. And so that would be one sort of subtle form of racism that you might see. Or you might even see differences in admissions, where maybe certain races are not, or I should say maybe certain, like white people, white being the dominant race in America, white people might be admitted at a higher rate, or it might be the reverse, where, here's an attempt to not look racist, so let's make sure that we admit a lot of minority students. So typically it'll be much more subtle like that. You'll probably very rarely see anything along the lines of like a hate crime that's, obviously driven by race.
How do teachers discriminate?
An instructor might, even on an unconscious level, because a lot of racism nowadays is thought to be implicit, meaning that we're not necessarily aware of it, but the fact that we face stereotypes every day means it sort of soaks into us anyway. And an instructor might, for example, avoid calling on minority students, or they might call on minority students more so in an attempt to not appear racist. Or what you might see is that they might have a tendency to, maybe when it comes to grading papers by minority students, they might have a tendency to go lighter on them because they're worried about coming across as racist. So that's a possibility. Or they might be harder on them because of their implicit biases.
Is there prejudice among other races on how they perform academically?
Absolutely, yes. I'd say that there's still a very pervasive stereotype that, for example, black students, Latino students, and so on. I wouldn't say this applies to Asian students, because Asian students kind of have the other stereotype. They have the stereotype that, they're really good in academics, and positive stereotypes are just as problematic as negative, so I'm not trying to excuse that in any way. But I'd say black students and Latino students in particular face the stereotype that they are less intelligent. And I'd say, yes, that's still a very strong stereotype, even though there's no evidence supporting it.
My name is Dr. Zach Justice. I am an assistant professor in communication studies, and that includes an assignment to frequently teach the course in freedom of speech. I'm also the faculty coordinator for the Chico Great Debate.
Is hate speech protected?
Yeah, hate speech is really interesting because in our everyday vernacular, we talk about hate speech as if that's a real legally designated thing, when in fact it isn't. Hate speech is protected just the same as all other forms of speech are protected, and that's what allows people to say all of the vile things that they do on internet forums and outside the funerals of people who have died in combat.
According to uslegal.com, a website that provides legal terms and legal definitions of U.S. Legal Forms Incorporated, hate speech is a communication that carries no meaning other than the expression of hatred for some group, especially in circumstances in which the communication is likely to provoke violence. It is an incitement to hatred primarily against a group of persons defined in terms of race, ethnicity, national origin, gender, religion, sexual orientation, and the like. Hate speech can be any form of expression regarded as offensive to racial, ethnic, and religious groups and other discrete minorities or to women. Why do you believe prejudice is still present at Chico State?
One of the things that makes universities interesting is that they bring together people from all different walks of life and from all different areas. And so people come here with baggage of all of those life experiences that they have had. And people come here with their prejudices and they come here with their experiences. And sometimes this is an enriching environment in which people are able to move beyond those things. Sometimes it's a reinforcing environment where you may have a predisposition about a group of people, and then for even though it may be inaccurate, then that gets reinforced in your time that's here. One of the nuances about prejudice is that it doesn't just end up coloring how we think about the world, and historically it ends up coloring how we experience the world. So if you have a stereotype about men or women or people from Vietnam or African Americans, oftentimes you only process the information that reinforces that stereotype and simply eliminate the other pieces from your experience. So that's one of the reasons it makes prejudice so hard to break, even in a campus environment that most of us would like to think is open and accepting.
How is Chico State handling racism?
Cross-Cultural Leadership Center, which is in Merriam Library right across from where First Year Experience is a great resource, and we've used their expertise and welcoming environment they create to help us deal with a number of situations that we've had as a department, and they also helped us prepare our instructors for the Great Debate this semester where the topic was diversity and discrimination. So there are all sorts of different resources on campus that deal with cultural issues, sexual issues, ethnic issues, and it's important to get people connected.
What advice do you have for incoming freshmen?
If you feel like something is being directed at you, brush it off, but in the same sentence, don't let it be forgotten. Don't let it go by as if that's okay. And if it really does bother you to the point to where you do want to act out, don't act out on anything that's going to make it worse or add to that stereotype. Handle it with the high road and be part of something like, CCLC that appreciates, many cultures and they don't really discriminate against each other. I see all walks of life walk into that office and they're always happy, they're always laughing, everything like that. Black leaders on campus, those kind of groups. I think those really are what deal with people who feel like they have something to say about stereotyping and diversity and discrimination. So involving themselves in those kind of groups.
In conclusion, racism comes in three forms: stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination. All three can be found here at Chico State as well as the rest of today's society. However, from what we have found, the extent of racism in Chico State is not out of proportion compared to the rest of the U.S. With that being said, the campus is aware of the problem and has multiple programs such as the Cross-Cultural Leadership Center and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion in place to combat racism and support those affected by it. If you are suffering from a form of racism, you should contact either one of these organizations.